I never thought I'd be the kind of woman to betray her vows. The idea once repulsed me. I believed love, once promised at the altar, was sacred, permanent. But life messy, unpredictable. Unforgiving life has a way of cracking open even the most stubborn beliefs. And when you're knee-deep in disappointment, the lines between right and wrong blur faster than you think. I met Armin when I was 26. He was smart, focused, driven, everything I thought a life partner should be. Our romance was brief, but intense. He swept me up in visions of a solid future, a partnership, a life built hand in hand. And I believed him, because I needed to. I was tired of the uncertainty of men who didn't know what they wanted. Armand made it all feel so certain. The first few years were good. We bought an apartment, made weekend traditions out of movie marathons and quiet dinners. It wasn't passionate, but it felt safe. And I convinced myself that safety was love. But over time, the silence between us grew heavier. Armand got busier first, with a promotion, then with urgent deadlines that stretched into late nights and early mornings. I cheered him on, told myself this was temporary, that all marriages had dry spells. But the truth? We weren't growing together. We were standing still, side by side, like strangers passing in a hallway. He wasn't cruel, just distant, emotionally absent. I tried to connect, to talk, but my words barely registered. Things will get better, he always promised, but they never did. They just got quieter. Our anniversary came and went. He forgot. That night, I wiped mascara from my cheeks alone, in the bathroom, whispering to myself not to make a big deal out of it. But deep down, something broke. I didn't feel like a wife anymore. I felt like a shadow. It was around that time I started spending more time at the community library. I've always loved books, and the quiet helped me breathe. That's where I met Riona Volunteer, kind-hearted, soft-spoken. We started talking about books at first, then about everything. He listened, really listened. Not just with polite nods, but with intention. I hadn't felt heard in years. One evening, told him something silly, a random story from childhood, and he laughed. Not out of politeness, but with real joy. "You light up when you talk about the things you love," he said. That moment shifted something in me. I went home and stared into the mirror. When was the last time someone saw me that way? When was the last time I saw myself that way? I tried to step back, avoided the library, avoided him. But it hurt, like punishing myself for feeling alive again. I didn't cross any lines physically, but emotionally, I knew I already had. The guilt sat in my chest like a stone. Armand didn't even notice. Most nights he was glued to his phone, answering late emails while I lay next to him, wondering how we ended up so far apart. One night, I came home late. Rayan and I had lost track of time, talking about an upcoming poetry event. When I walked in, Armand looked up from the couch. There was something in his eyes, confusion, maybe suspicion. He asked where I'd been. I told him. He nodded, then said nothing. That silence stretched for days. Weeks later, he told me he'd been offered a new role in a different city. He told me casually over breakfast, like it was no big deal. I asked when he planned to tell me. I wasn't sure, he said. Was waiting for the right moment. It's when I realized we had stopped being partners a long time ago. We were just updating each other like colleagues on a shared project. I never told Rayan the full story. I didn't want to be the woman who complained about her husband to another man. But the guilt was suffocating. I stopped looking in mirrors, started waking up with headaches. I didn't like who I was becoming, but I didn't know how to stop. And then, one afternoon, it all unraveled. I'd left my phone on the coffee table while I showered. Armand was home. When I stepped out, he was holding my phone, his face pale, unreadable. He'd seen my messages to Rayan. Nothing explicit, but enough to show the depth of our connection. He looked at me and asked quietly, "Is there something you want to tell me?" I froze. I could have lied, could have brushed it off. But I saw the exhaustion in his eyes, the tired truth we had both been avoiding. So I told him. I said, I felt. Alone, I said I tried for years to feel close to him again. I said I found someone who made me feel seen. I didn't justify it. I didn't beg for forgiveness. I just told him the truth back, because after years of pretending, it was least we both deserved. He didn't chill, he didn't cry, he just sat down like a weight of it all had finally become a tumik. That night, we didn't talk, he slept in the guest room. I stayed awake till morning, staring at the ceiling, wondering when exactly we had stopped being us. The days that followed were quiet. We tiptoed around each other like strangers, sharing the same space. I stopped going to therapy. I stopped replying to Rayon. I needed to figure things out, not just about my marriage, but about myself. I knew I had to make a decision not based in shame or guilt, but on what was truly right, not just for me, but for both of us best sometimes. The hardest truth to accept is this: even good people can end up in bad places when they stop tending to what matters. And now I was standing at the edge of summit Thingerverbers. What came next would test every part of him. The morning after he found the massages, everything changed, but in was I hadn't expected. Armand wasn't angry, noting the explosive way I had braced myself for. He was quiet, cold, like someone had turned off a switch inside him. That silence, that lack of reaction hurt more than yelling ever could have. He avoided, not with hatred, but with disappointment. That was harder too. Carry disappointment doesn't fade quickly. It lingers. It reminded me every second that Ty had been the one to let go. First, I kept myself busy around the house, cleaned things that didn't need cleaning, glaring drawers, cooked meals that went untouched, anything to avoid through it of the silence. Sitting between Usoni evening 3 days later, he broke it one to talk. He said, standing by theater way of the kitchen. I nodded, my hand still wrapped around the tea mug. Hadn't sipped in an hour. He sat across from me, shoulders, rigid eyes, dark and unreadable. I'm not going to scream, I'm not going to play the victim, but I wanted you to be honest with me. How long has this been going on? I took a deep breath. A few months, but not in the way you're thinking. Nothing physical ever happened. I swear. Looked away, but it was emotionally and nodded slowly. Yes. He didn't respond immediately. I could tell he was holding something back. Do you love him? The question hitherder than I expected. I opened my mouth and closed it. The truth was, I didn't know what I felt for. Rayon wasn't simply, wasn't lust or fantasy. It was comfort. It was connection. But love, that word felt too heavy, too sacred to throw into this broken space between us. No, I finally said, but I cared. I needed something and I went looking for it. Wrong place. Armand closed his eyes. And me, did you ever feel the need to come looking for me? Again, that question broke me, because he was right somewhere along the line. I had stopped trying. I had given up on us before even saying it out loud, and he deserved better than thought he did. I whispered, but I think we were all ready to fare apart. We sat in silence after that, noiling, no blame, quiet truth hanging between us. In the days thought followed, Armand suggested we go to therapy. I was surprised. He'd always been skeptical of those things, but maybe part of him still wanted to understand what went wrong, or maybe he just wanted to mock a sense of the woman he no longer recognized. We began with separate sessions, then moved into couples therapy. It was uncomfortable. At first, we'd never been the type to talk about feelings, but therapy forced us to. It stripped away all the roles we played: husband, wife, trayer, victim, and laid bare the messy human parts underneath. One session, Armand said something that stuck with me. I wasn't present. I know that I buried myself in work, thinking it was for us, but now I realize I used it to avoid facing Howlandly. I felt you. That was the first time I saw his pain, not just the pain I caused, but Theon he had been carrying even before. We had both been lonely in the same house, both pretending that silence was strength. I started to understand that our marriage hadn't been healthy for a long time. We had grown apart, not because of a single affair or mistake, but because we stopped nourishing each other emotionally. And while I had made a choice I deeply regretted, it was also a symptom of a larger wound we had ignored for too long. Ryan, meanwhile, faded into the background. I hadn't contacted him since a day Armand found the messages he had reached Out once, a short text saying, he hopped. I was okay. I never replied. I knew. Owed him an explanation, but I also knew I couldn't keep one foot in the past while trying to rebuild the present a few weeks into therapy. I wrote him a message, not long, just enough to say thank you for being kind, for listening, but that I needed to focus on my marriage and my healing, I told him. I couldn't be in touch anymore. I deleted his number after that. It hurt more than I expected, but it also felt like closing a chapter. That never should have been happened. Therapy helped us talk. But healing was slow. We still had arguments some days. We barely spoke other days, well odd for the first time in months. And it felt strange, like wearing a forgotten shirt. I started journaling. Writing down me thoughts helped me untangle the guilt, anger, the confusion. I wrote letters. To myself, to the version of me who made mistakes, and I forgave her, not to justify her, but to release the shame if that was eating me all of Ione day. About 2 months into our therapy, Armin and I went for a walk. No phones, no distractions, just us and the sound. Oh, 4 footsteps. Do you think we can come back from this? I asked. He didn't answer right away. Then he said, I don't know, but I'm willing to try. Are you? Looked at him, really? Looked at him, noticed the man who failed me, or the man. But as someone standing beside Mestel, willing to fight for something, why once? Believe it, and I am, I said. We weren't healed, far from it, but for the first time. In a long time we were honest, and that was a thing. In the weeks that followed, we made small changes, date nights, even I've just at home weekly check-ins. A rule of thought, phones stayed away. During meals, we didn't pretend things were perfect, we just committed to showing up, but there were setbacks to triggers, fight, sleepless nights. One evening, I saw him staring at me quietly. I asked what he was thinking. I don't know if I can ever fully trust you again. He said, I know, Daddy, understand, I don't expect you to beauty'll keep showing up if you'll let him. That's the thing they don't tell. Yeah, about rebuilding. It's not about grand gestures. It's about the quiet daily decisions to stay, to talk, to try, even when it's hard. A few months later, we took a weekend trip. Out of town, just the two of us, no therapy, no distractions, just fresh hair and long walks and coffee in Silencion. Night sitting by a campfire. Armin looked at me and said, I still love you, but I don't know if I love who we became. I felt tears sting my eyes. Then let's become someone else together. He reached out and took my hand. We didn't promise forever, we just promised that tomorrow. And for now, that was enough. Booty knew this story wasn't over. The hardest part was still ahead. Rebuilding not just a marriage, but a sense of self-back's forgiveness. True forgiveness is a single decision. It's a choice we make over and over, and I wasn't done making it yet. Some stories don't end with closure, they end with clarity, and that's when I was finally starting Tofine. Not a perfect ending, but a clearer sense of who I was and who I didn't want to bogone after our weekend away. Armand and E settled back into our lives. Bosom thing had shifted. There was still space between us, but it didn't feel as cold. It was the kind of space you need to breathe, not the kind you hide in. I continued therapy on my own. I needed it not for the marriage, but for myself, to understand how I, someone who once believed so strongly in loyalty and honesty, had crossed a line I swore in. Never would. My therapist helped me see that affairs, emotional or otherwise, begin with attraction. They begin with unmet needs and silence. The silence had started long before. Rayon and Areth picture. I had buried parts of my soul, ignored warning signs, convinced myself that being loyal meant being silent. I stopped asking for love in the way I needed it. And when I found someone who gave me a glimpse of it, I mistook it for salvation. But no one can save you from what you refuse to face. That was my biggest lesson. Armin and I continue ed therapy together. To some sessions were hopeful, others reopened wounds, wound-packed things we hadn't dared to talk about in years. Old arguments, unmet expectations, even grief we had never processed. Slowly, the walls between us began to lower. We made new rules, not for control, but for communication. If one of us felt unseen, we said it. If something was wrong, we named it. We agreed. Thedavon's uncomfortable honesty was better. Unquanted resentment, but trust. Trust was the slowest to return third. Were days when Armand would look at, and I could tell he was remembering Zamidis he'd ask questions about. Rian, about what I felt about why I didn't talk to him before I let it go. That Fari answered every question. I didn't get defensive. I knew he had therite. To know he was choosing to stay and work through this, and the least. E could give him waste transparency. One night he asked, "Did you ever think about leaving me?" It took me a moment to respond. Yes. I said quietly, but not because I didn't love Vo, because I didn't know if we were still capable of loving each other the way we used to. And now, he asked, now I think love isn't something you feel. All the time it's something you decide to build every day. Especially Heen. It's hard he didn't respond, but he squeezed my hand sometimes that said more than words a few months later something. Unexpected happened Rain showed up, not physically, but in a letter had written to say goodbye. He said he respected my silence but wanted to leave with no confusion, no lingering words left. Unsaid, he said he understood why he chose to step away, and that he wished him peace and healing. I showed the letter to Armin. I didn't have to, but I wanted to. I was done hiding. He read it, then folded it and said, "Do you want to reply?" It shook my head. Number that chapter's closed, and I meant it not because Rayan was a bad person. He wasn't. But because that part of my life had come from a place of brokenness. I didn't want to build anything new on top of something cracked. Healing isn't linear there. Where relapses moments when Armand would go quiet for hours. Pulled into his own thoughts moments when I'd wonder if he saw me and still remembered the pain. There were days we laughed like nothing had ever gone wrong, and others when Wes struggled to even look at each other. But slowly, something new began to grow between us, not the old love that was gone buried with who we used to be. This was something different. It was the love of two people who had fallen apart and chosen to stand in the rubble and rebuild. We started spending time intentionally, game nights, walks, morning coffee. On the balcony, even if it was started as 10 minutes, we started asking questions again. Not just about bills and chores, but about dreams and fears and random things we used to wonder about. Before life got in the way, we even started traveling again, short trips. At first, one weekend, we went hiking, we got lost on the trail, and ended up walking 2 extra hours before finding our way back. We laughed, got annoyed, helped each other through the rough parts. It felt like a metaphor for us one night, maybe a year after the fallout. We hosted dinnerot, our place, family and friends, music. At some point in the evening, I stepped away to the kitchen and just watched. Armand from a distance was smiling, genuine lilling, talking with his sister, pouring drinks, looking comfortable. In his own skin again for the first time in a long time. He looked light. I hadn't realized how heavy we'd both been until Fatman he caught me staring and gave me a small smile. It wasn't romantic or dramatic, just simple, real. After everyone left, we were cleaning up and he said, "You know, I never thought we'd make it through this." "Me neither," I admitted, "but I'm glad we tried," he added mood. He reached for my hand. No promises, no perfect ending, just a people standing in the present, choosing to stay here our days. I still feel guilt. I didn't think that ever completely goes away, and I don't expect Armand to forget some cracks stay even after the repair.